Good morning.
Morning.
How are you today?
Good, I'm great.
Excellent. Will you please tell us your name and share anything about yourself you feel comfortable sharing with us?
Sure. Well, my name's Christopher Argyris. I'm from Oakland, California. I live currently in London, England. Let's see, my career is spent, I've done various things. I started out as a journalist. I've been a diplomat, project manager, um, researcher, analyst, and my latest thing is completing a PhD in international law at University of London School of Oriental and African Studies.
That's wonderful. I can't wait to hear more about the course. So how did you move from Oakland to London? What made you transition to that place?
Okay, so immediately after college, I went to college at Northwestern in Chicago, and then I moved straight to Washington, D.C. to work for NBC News in their Washington bureau. I did that for a couple of years in the entry-level desk assistant job where a lot of people start their careers. Then I came back to California, did some more journalism, and then I transitioned into political campaigns. And then I went back to Washington, D.C. and started working for a State Department supported project. And so that really, got me focused internationally. And then from Washington, D.C. in 2015, moved to London to start the PhD and do consulting and international work here.
So do you intend to stay in London? You intend that this is the place where you found your roots and you feel best there?
I definitely feel at home in Europe. I guess now the UK with Brexit no longer considered himself part of Europe. So my family is Greek, so I'm obtaining Greek citizenship so that I'll have the right to stay and work in the EU. Whether that gives me rights to stay in the UK is another matter. But yeah, depending on how things go in the fall, I probably will stay here in Europe. Yeah.
Yeah. Just for a clarification, for those who do not know, EU is.
So the European Union was 28 states, now 27 states. Most of what you consider Western Central Europe, and of course, since 2016, the UK has decided to leave the European Union. So Europeans that had a right to work anywhere in Europe, if they don't have residency as of this year, then the UK can say, well, we don't recognize your right to stay, even if you've been here, 10 years or so. So
okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you've had a very diverse career, a very exciting career. So where are you going next? What is it that when you get this PhD, what is it that you want to do with the degree?
So my PhD is focusing on international law on places that I call liminal states, places that aren't recognized by the UN or other by the global community as states, but they have legal systems and enough of the trappings of state that they would otherwise qualify, or there's some international reason why they're being held back from being states. So I would like to continue working on sort of these frozen conflicts, places like Cyprus Conflict. The northern part of Cyprus is occupied by Turkey, and they claim that they have their own state there. But then tricky situations like the Western Sahara, occupied by Morocco. Morocco considers it their southern territory, but the Sahrawi people there have, it's kind of the last colony in that area. They consider that the UN has said they have a right to self-determination, and the Moroccans say this is Moroccan territory, and international courts have gone against that and said no, it's not Moroccan territory. Give them the vote for independence. And the U.S. it says has been a partner of Morocco and said, well, they're a partner with us in the war on terror, so we'll let them if they want to have autonomy versus independents will let them do that. So these tricky situations like that, which are related to my PhD, which I think as a former diplomat and an international law expert, I would have some brief to be able to help assist in figuring out these situations.
That's wonderful. Without naming names or point to any particular party, can you talk a little bit about the last few elections, going back to Bush and Gore, the Hillary and number 45, and the climate around these political campaigns, and then the outcomes of them? Can you just talk a little bit about, how did we get where we are? So we had hanging chads, and now we've got the left and the right, and defund the police and all these things flowing through campaigns. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I sort of come full circle, even though I live in the UK from California, and I left Washington D.C. I'm actually a Florida voter. So the whole hanging chads thing and the efficacy of the election, one thing I'd like to point out, everyone in Florida who doesn't vote in person votes by mail. We don't have absentee voting. There's no requirement to be able to say why you can't attend the poll in person. So as we've seen at the highest level, this saying that one thing is okay and the other thing is not okay is thrown out the window. I don't know. I mean, I would say, I was just finishing college from the 2000 election, and until now, I just will sort of point to the way that certain party has used the courts as to try to sort of overturn like the democratic process, and to whether it's voter ID or any other kind of thing which keeps people from who have a legitimate right to vote from voting. I think you will see that the more people that are allowed to vote, the more democratic lowercase d you have, and one party doesn't want everyone who's to vote, and so I think you trace the elections from 2000 to 2016 in terms of restrictions on voting versus the things that we've since 1965 have we were promised a vote in 1865 for everyone, and it took 100 years to even get a right and protected vote. And then from 65 to 2000 and 2018, and now you have people who are stricken off the voting rolls and other kinds of things. And so there's one party that doesn't want everyone to vote, and another party that says that everyone should vote. And I think that's where we are now.
So it's very interesting you brought that up, because that was going to be one of my questions. So I, as you can obviously see, I'm a Black person, a Black woman. I grew up in the rural South, and I was very, very, very young when the things about voting was really hot. So the Voting Rights Amendment, and of course, I'm sure you know that Black men were given the right to vote before white women, right? So, and since then, there have been constant challenges to the Voting Rights Amendments. Why? And I think what you said is one party wants some of the people to vote, another party wants all the people to vote. Is that the real reason why the Voting Rights Amendment always hangs in the balance? It's almost like the Abortion Rights Amendment, like kind of every once in a while, depending on who's elected, these amendments become fodder for them to get what they want for their overall group and their constituencies.
Sure. I mean, you have, again, I'm not singling out parties, but we all know who they are. But now with the nomination of Kamala Harris as the next vice president of the United States, you immediately have people coming out and saying, oh, because her parents were both here on student visas and maybe not a permanent status at the time, that her birth should disqualify her to be president or vice president, and it's just very clear that that certain fights which we thought were settled on one side are always going to use them, even if they cynically don't believe what they're talking about. It's just as a wedge, and it's a way to again suppress the vote, because they know that they say, okay, the difference between Obama's elections and Hillary's defeat is that there was a certain amount of percentage of Obama voters that stayed home. And so they're trying to discourage those same voters from coming out because they know that a certain amount of turnout will make their reelection impossible.
Right.
So I think that whether it's issues about and now of course you have the issues with the postal service, and there's just everywhere you look, whether it's the issue of of whether former felons have the right to vote or other kind of thing. There's just a way to sort of there's an expression where you say, like, whether like you have voters choose the candidates or candidates choose the voters. Yeah. In a sense, right now we have one party that wants to choose the voters and another party that wants to choose the candidates.
Absolutely. And so since this is a diversity chat, the point you just made up about felons. So those who have been incarcerated have a tough time reassimilating back into the culture that they came from and in the society as a whole, right? And so we know we can go back and look at voting rights. So the poll tax, where what's really interesting about the poll tax and pig laws is, so if you go back and look at those things, everything had been done humanly possible to prevent these people from getting an education. And then they put questions for them to ask that they know that maybe a select group may be able to answer, but the majority cannot. And it goes back to your point of, you selecting the voters. So here you are, where you have these formerly enslaved people seeking opportunity to participate in the political process and being denied. Here in North Carolina, where we are, redistricting, I can't say that word right now, redistrict, yeah, that word, whatever. But anyway, creating corners where the vote is this vote, and the person who's responsible for that group, the legislator that is responsible for that group might be from this party or that party. And if you can carve out states and areas where you get a certain voting body, you have more chance to win. So, you have politicians who've been in Congress, Senate for 30, 40, 50 years, and there are no term limits. So what does that mean to voting, especially for people of color? So, and I want to add one more little piece to this. So the Hispanic community or the Latino community, and I did just recently learn that was two separate communities. But anyway, what does that mean when you have all of these groups who I'm going to just say the combination of Hispanic and Latino communities, illegal immigration, all that, how does that all fold together into a package that looks like electoral college?
That's a big question. I just try to break it down a little bit. One thing that I've sort of noticed is that there's an effort to make different voting blocks as a monolith. And as you mentioned, the Hispanic Latino community, you could say, okay, there's a split there. And again, I voted in Florida, so this is a huge issue in Florida. You have the Cuban emigres who are very anti-Castro and very, very heavily Republican, because they think that the Democrats are trying to appease Cuba or make friends with Cuba when they just want everything with the Castro regime rooted out. And then you have, of course, Latino who are, many immigrants and families who have undocumented members and their families. So they tend to see one party as being very racist or anti-immigrant, saying that we want Americans and American jobs when they're doing the jobs that Americans won't do.
Right.
And take away all of those people and then see how the economy falls apart. I would just say that you have one party that prides itself on being a mosaic, like putting together. We don't see one people as one way. Everyone has the same views. It's a coalition of immigrants, of LGBT, of just working class. Everyone under one tent, whereas another party will just kind of say, we want to go back to the 1950s when America was great, and we all know what that means and who's excluded from that conversation. So I would just say that and there's one thing I'd like to bring up now is you see a lot of speakers at this convention that are not meant to make outreach to African American communities or Latino communities, but it's to make it palatable because they're making these speakers, putting these speakers out there. They're making it palatable to white voters to say, I can vote for Trump because he's not racist. Because why would he be racist if he has Herschel Walker? And actually, got in his Twitter discussion about, oh, well, is Trump racist if he has, if Herschel Walker says that he has a friendship with him? And I just said, he's a guy that doesn't really have friends, really is a transactional relationships. And just because one prominent, and a former NFL player says that he's my friend and he's not racist, it's like somebody saying everyone has a black friend, and they always say, oh, I'm not racist, I have a black friend.
Right. Horrible statement. Absolutely horrible statement, because it's as offensive as it can be, because I've heard that so many times as a justification for behaviors. So I want to ask you another question. That was very beautiful, very eloquent the way you stated that. Thank you very much for that. So I want to ask you a question. So when Mr. Floyd was killed on May 25th, there was this moment that just popped up, and everybody was protesting, and protesting were not just Black people, but people from all across the world, all everywhere, right? So there was this moment in time where there was, in a vernacular, awoke. We woke up, right? Whatever that means, right? So why is it that white people who have had the best education, the best outcomes, every opportunity given to them, everything there, find themselves now just realizing that killing Black men has happened? Now, a lot of people have equated that because we're COVID and we have to stay home, and so we get to watch more TV or something like that. And I'm asking you this as a white man, in your history books, did it not talk about slavery? Did it not talk about Reconstruction? Did it not talk about the poll tax, the pig laws, slave patrols? Did it not talk about any of that in your history, about the 40 acres and a mule? How come white Americans are coming to this place where they are, I guess, becoming more aware of what's happening around them? Why is that not something they've known their entire existence? And I will add my final piece to that is reparations. Why do they claim, well, I don't need to make reparations because I didn't own slaves, and they don't make the connection to what their ancestors and their original class was, and then the immigrants. So how many people in America before 1619, or even before the first pilgrims and colonists came, are actually Americans? Aren't they immigrants too? So my two questions: not in the books, and are they immigrants too?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I would maybe just first of all say that I can't speak for all white people, and my experience is my experience. And while I wish, and I do come from would say I was fortunate to come from a privileged background, and to be exposed to diversity on, a wealth of different people, perspectives and backgrounds from an early age. One of the seminal sort of experiences in my growing up, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's known on the East Coast, but there's the Reverend Cecil Williams at the Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco, is sort of the model for me, a mentor in terms of being somebody that welcomes all comers. I'm not particularly religious, but this church, which is based on public service and community service, welcomes all comers. Non-denominational, gay, straight, LGBT. Everyone is welcome, and all perspectives are appreciated. And I think that if you go to way that a lot of people were raised, they're only exposed to people that look like them, think like them, and the curriculums are set so that a certain narrative is I mean, if growing up in the South, I'm sure that the textbooks there will say that the Civil War was about states' rights and not fought about slavery. And the statues that are in Durham or anywhere around the South were not put up 1865, but they were put up Jim Crow and from 1920s and 1940s. Anytime they wanted to, they saw that Black people were becoming full citizens and put up statues to remind them, this is we put these up to remind you that we don't consider you part of the American story, and that you say these are our grandfathers fought for this cause, the lost cause, and this is put up not because we believe in America for everyone.
Yeah. I think your point, and I'm not asking you to speak for all white people. What I'm asking, is just, I'm sure you had a population of students who went to school with you, probably had similar textbooks and all of that. What my concern is, and I'm not asking you to answer this. It's like, because my textbook told me that Christopher Columbus discovered America. My textbooks told me that the Civil War was about states' rights. It never talked about the economics of slavery. Never. Nothing I read until I was an adult did I learn about these things. Now, pig laws, all these things I have learned as an adult. I did not learn in school. I also, when I was in school, I was told that I was not smart enough to participate in the American society. So that meant to me what I heard, and especially as I've gotten older and been able to extrapolate that a little bit, is that the American society is white, Protestant, whatever those WASP, whatever those terms mean, and that I don't belong, right? And so when you look at the economic factors that resulted from slavery, all the innovations, so all the big entrepreneurs of the day back in the 1800s, all did this on the backs of Black people. And like you could pick any one of those wealthy families and see how they have been able to transfer their generation wealth all the way down to their present day children, right? Whereas Black people unequally are impoverished, lower education, no matter how many times we talk about. So under Bush, it was No Child Left Behind. You have all these policies that are created, but literally in the academic environment across whatever level, elementary all the way to college and post-secondary and all that, that Black people are always somewhere lower out of the equation, even if they are smart, even if they prove that they have merit, nope, not that way. And so I think your point about the narrative is absolutely perfect. But I want to go back and ask you the second part of my question. Your parents came to America at some point, maybe not your parents, but your grandparents, some of your parents came to America at some point. Are they not immigrants?
Yes.
So why is it there's such a difference between those people and Japanese, Chinese, Hispanic, Latino, Cuban, whatever they are? why do we make such a difference about Black and brown people and them being immigrants, and why immigration is now a bad thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, and again, sort of, I could bring up to date with the sort of criticisms of Kamala Harris and Obama as saying, well, you know, because their fathers were from Africa or Jamaica, that they didn't have, that they're not, that might be Black, but they're not African American. Like this sort of cleaving of saying, well, one experience is different than the rest, when it's really about, you know, race is a social construct, and that we're all the human race, and that's that. I'm really intrigued to read the new Isabel Wilkerson book, Cast, showing how the you know, this is all it's about sociology and not anything about genetics or anything like that. And then, like, I don't want to plug the book, but it's like sort of in the ways that even like the American experience with segregation informed Nazi Germany and their you know, ways to subjugate the Jews. And so it's like we think of ourselves as this great liberator of nations, and yet we have the original sin, you know, which our nation was based on, and you know, that's why people would. I'm not making the case for reparations, but people could make the case for reparations and say that we haven't been one nation with everyone, you know, given equal opportunity from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. Very, very, very good way to explain that. And I'm sorry, I do ask complex questions, and I do because, you know, we don't have all day. Plus, there is a lot to unpack in where we are in the world, you know. So my next question is just, how is Europe, Greece, Turkey, and anywhere else you've been different than America in terms of race and gender?
Okay, well, gender, race. Okay, so I would say in Europe, there are certain countries that I would say do a better job in sort of going back to that mosaic that I talked about, and other states. I mean, I don't want to single out places, but places that that, again, anyone that doesn't look like them. You know, that's the thing about America. You can't say what do Americans look like. You know, it's we are founded. We are a nation because everyone is sort of agreeing that they want to live under the Constitution and sort of these American ideals. And whereas in Europe, you know, you're French because you know, you're 10 generations back to France, or you know, you're Greek because you trace your ancestors back to the ancient Greeks and Aristotle and Socrates. Some people would argue that because Greece has changed so much, that the ancient Greeks, the people who are in Greece now, don't share the same blood as the ancient Greeks, and not, you know, what we consider Greek now is people who are from Bulgaria, Turkey, you know, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, who, you know, might have some common ancestry, but to say that you're Greek doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, that 5,000 or 2,000 years ago your ancestors were living under the Acropolis.
Yeah. I think that one of the interesting things about, well, let me start right this way. I haven't traveled outside of the United States probably in 25, 26 years.
Yeah.
I've been to Germany, been to London, on my way to Italy, but got turned around, so I didn't get there. But my experience are, there's, I wouldn't say a large, but a good population of Africans, true Africans, people who have come from Africa in those areas.
Yeah.
There is a much smaller populations of African Americans or African Brazilians and those things who make up those countries, and they look like they're in little small pockets, right?
Yeah.
like, so there's that. So when I every year I talk at this conference, it's called All Things Open, and I talk about that. And I had one gentleman last year said it wasn't until he came to America that he knew what the word race meant, because he thought race meant running, like see if you can run to run a race. He never experienced being labeled, and I can't remember what part of the world he came from. Not what I mean, he was African, of course, but he had moved to some other part of the overseas. He could not. He said he had not experienced race the way he has since he's come to America. And I wanted to challenge him, because I said, so for me, the utopia is Canada. That's utopia, right? So less guns, less violence, more appreciation of diversity.
Sure.
But is that a correct statement that gentleman made? And I'm not asking you broadly, I'm asking you narrowly. So is it such that race is not as a significant topic as it is here in America, in other parts of the world, such as Europe? I don't know about Australia and other places, but is it that still exists? And I know issues that Australia has, but I mean, is it that way in other countries? So what do you see in London? When you see somebody there, or do you see that there's a separation between people by race and gender?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would sort of say that the UK is not the model for mosaic, harmonious, diverse experience, because of the history of empire and colonization. But if you look at other countries in Europe, that you would say where race isn't so much an issue, it sort of depends on at what time are we talking about, and there's definitely a rise recently in nationalist movements which have sort of upended this sort of harmonious idea that you can be French, or you can be Hungarian, or you can be German, and not look like your neighbor. I think that there's issues now with the I would say the Middle Eastern refugee crisis, and sort of which European countries let in more refugees or not, and to look at compared to the U.S., there's not a lot of Syrian refugees that were let into the U.S., whereas other countries have absorbed them, either just because they came ashore, or because they accepted them as official refugee immigrants. And that I would say that the difference between Europe and the United States is that they don't have the history of slavery. During the Middle Ages, they had like feudal times and the king, and you could say everyone was slaves under them. But the unique experience of the U.S., and I would say the UK as well, is that we imported a slave labor class, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of that. Whereas European societies tend to see themselves as more enlightened and more pluralistic, but it's just, again, everything comes in waves and cycles, and that you'd say look at Germany now, but who could imagine that the same German society would have been a Nazi state, which was completely about an Aryan race, and everyone else is undesirable, and get rid of them. So everything comes in cycles, and just because we think that Europe looks better for, you mentioned Canada, as a utopia, they of course have a huge issue with their native, how they've treated their native first Canadians, whatever you want to call them, and they were basically not citizens and erased from society, and discriminated against until very, very recently. So even a state like Canada, who we see as very welcoming to immigrants, and again, sort of based on you believe in a certain way and don't have to look a certain way or have a certain ancestor. Canada has its own issues as well. It's just it's overall a smaller country, so we Americans, we tend not to know too much about what's going on just north of the border. So
we only know what they tell us in the media. You know, they shape the narrative that we get, right? So, you know, the way we are hearing, you know, I say in the last 10, 12 years that Canada is open to diversity and open to opportunities for all. Whereas, you know, I do know going back a while, you know, sort of like, you know, Australia and their people, you know, like there's some people that were just ostracized from society.
sure.
But I want to say first a little bit about you. So, you know, I don't know you personally. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's very nice to meet you. But Rochelle speaks highly of you. And if you know my daughter, you know my daughter is extremely, extremely open-hearted and warm. You know, so she is inviting, and she tries to see the world through lens that are not colored by race or gender or sexual orientation or any of that, but just that, right? Yes. And so when Rochelle says to me, you need to talk to this guy, it makes me know that I'm going to get a great conversation because of her lens. So I want to thank you for that. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want you to say whatever you need to say, whatever you want to share that we didn't cover, or if there's something you want to tell us, please, if you have a business or something you want to tell us about, anything like that. And then I would ask you to close with what's your dream job or your dream career?
Okay. I mean, this discussion has sort of reminded me of a quote that's attributed to Mark Twain, but you know, with a lot of quotes from Mark Twain, we don't know whether he actually said it, but it's basically talking about how the more you travel, the less prejudices you have, and that people that are the most bigoted, sheltered, maybe just have never left their own community. And of course, travel is a privilege, and you know, especially in these times. But it's not always open to everyone. But you know, just sort of encourage people to travel if they can, experience new things, new cultures, and if they can't travel in person, to read. I think books and stuff like that really open you up to diverse thought, diverse perspectives, to be able to see outside oneself, and that's really, you know, where empathy comes from. I think that what we, you know, in society now, we have a deficit of empathy because people are only out for themselves, or can only mirroring. They see they want to see the way they think other people think the way that they think, because they can't imagine anyone not thinking the way that they think. And that's how we get into these very polarized enclaves. And just sort of bringing it back to politics in the end, you know, people were criticizing Joe Biden or something like that for saying he used to work with Republicans or people that didn't share his views, but he was able to find common ground. And that's something that you praised, you know, praised like Ted Kennedy or Tip O'Neill for working with Reagan, and people that you could say, we're in such a highly polarized world right now. You know, can't imagine anything finding common ground with a Republican or someone who's an independent doesn't share your views. But I would say I'm hopeful. I'm sort of the relentless optimist that things come in cycles, and that this sort of hyper partisan era will pass, and whether that because like there'll be another party after the Republicans, or the Republicans will sort of reform themselves after seeing how far off they went under this administration, or you know, the last couple administrations. I mean, to say that this administration makes George Bush look great is sort of an indictment of a party and not just of a candidate. But just to say that, you know, maybe my optimism, and again, that's where I share, I'm simpatico with your daughter, that we're both we want to see the best in people, and we'll trust people until they've hurt us or wronged us, and that it's just for us it's a better outlook than to be suspicious of everyone and not be willing to try new things, but to be able to put ourselves out there, to live our lives, to interact with people who we don't know will share common ground with us, but we come to see them as allies and compatriots, is something that that's why I got on with your daughter, and why I knew that sort of coming to talk with you would be, in that same spirit.
Well, thank you for that. Now, what's your dream job?
My dream job is probably working with the UN on these, intractable nationality, statehood issues, sorting out the legal and the political and places that have been in frozen conflicts for decades. I'm a firm believer that there's a way to compromise and to come out with a win-win for everyone, and that I as much as the UN is criticized for being corrupt or mismanaged, I believe there are good people there, and that that you could do a good job there. And then we'll see with the next administration. Maybe I don't see myself coming back to the U.S., but maybe a future in government. But for now, international.
Well, thank you very much for that. I ask you, if you think this talk was valuable, please subscribe to my channel and share with your friends to chat with me. I think you can tell from these chats, I'm not trying to malign anyone. There are some things there, and people think, well, I don't want to get there because I might say something inappropriate. I mean, I think if people listen to your chat, I think they will learn a lot. This has been very informative, even to me, who I thought I had a great grasp on politics and race, and I found myself learning a lot from you today. So thank you so much for that. I am very grateful for your time, and thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. As soon as the video converts, I'll send you a link. Please look at it, make sure it's sufficient for you.
Great. I'm sure it'll be great. Thank you so much. It was really enlightening and great experience. And I, especially during like COVID, my personal interactions are limited. So it's always great to have new chats and
Absolutely. Well, if you want to come
asking
back,
hard questions, which is good,
Well, you want to come back and chat with me again? I'm happy for you to do it.
I would love to. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll find a time. What is this? Maybe sometime early October.
Yeah, maybe that sounds good.
Yeah. So one question that's not related, but you're in school now. Are you taking in-person classes, or are you doing?
So the PhD is just for better or for worse, it's just all about you
writing
and editing. And, I'm in sort of the final stages of submitting. It's just I want it to be good enough that it stands up to the scrutiny of the examiners, and so.
I remember mine. It was absolutely horrific. I think I have about 30 or 40 drafts of my dissertation.
Yeah.
And you find one word wrong, sit in front of the committee, and they just throw it out.
Yeah.
So and when you change that one word, it changes things further up or further below.
Yeah.
So, oh my God, I remember that nightmare very, very well. So I wish you all the best on that. And
yes.
I'll reach out to you again as we get closer to the end of September to see what's good for you in your schedule.
Oh, great.
And what time is it now in London?
So it's 5 hours ahead. It's like it's almost 3.
Almost 3 o'clock. Okay, so this time would work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty flexible. I'll fit in whenever.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Chris. This has been wonderful. I really, really appreciate this. And again, I'll send you a link. Please watch it. Make sure it's in compliance with your thoughts and ideas are, and let me know if I may upload it.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Dr. Newton. I appreciate it.
You do the same. Stay safe.
Okay, take care.